Okay, good afternoon and welcome. And this is the Senate Committee on Institutions. It is Tuesday, January 21st. I'm Wendy Harrison. I'm the chair of this committee. And because the beginning of the week, we'll go around and introduce ourselves.
Senator Russ Engels, Essex District.
Senator Joe Major, Windsor.
Senator Rob Puckett, Bennington District.
Senator Sam Davis, Orleans District.
Thank you. And Linda Lehman is our intrepid committee assistant, and I represent the Wyndham District. And today we have BGS, which is the Department of Buildings and General Services. They take care of a huge number of buildings and other things. And we're going to go over the phases of construction. And if we can, we're going to get into project updates. And if you're looking at our agenda, we may not get the tour of the State House today. We were hoping David Sheets might be available, but unless he becomes available, we'll just do that another day. But just for the, especially for the new members, it's really good to see what's happening in the State House, because this is one of the buildings that is in our purview, and it's obviously a critical building for many reasons. So with that, I will hand it over to Wanda Minoli, Commissioner of the Department of Buildings and General Services.
So good afternoon. It is wonderful being back here. Wanda Minoli, Commissioner of Buildings and General Services. And I do have to add, I love the curators tours of the State House because they are full of information. You won't read someplace. So enjoy when you do get the opportunity. Madam Chair, we're here to present. So first of all, Joe Aja, as you know, is our Director of Design and Construction, and I'll let Joe officially introduce himself.
For the record, Joe Aja, Director of Design and Construction for Buildings and General Services.
So this week we've been asked to accomplish a couple things with the committee. One is to just do a review of the phases of building construction. And there's about 6 different phases and terminology that we use very consistently. And then give you an overview of the updates of the capital bill from 24-25 specific to the projects, which talk about what status they're in, the money that we've spent as of January. And we just give you a general overview. We're not connecting anything, as you know, until it's addressed next week. And with your permission, I think when we get done just doing the overview on the 6 phases, because for most of the members of this committee, you're familiar with it, I think we could move into the slides if you're comfortable doing that.
Yes, I just want to make sure, actually, most of us are new.
Oh,
There's 3 of us who are new.
I had it backwards. I apologize.
It's a slim margin, but
So
yeah.
it might be this definition is really helpful because you will hear us using the terminology all through presenting the budget. And then the other thing, this is just a question of clarity for us. The spreadsheet, there's an FY 24-25 capital bill spreadsheet that you concluded the end of last year with. Have you done a review of that spreadsheet as a committee?
We have a general overview. It wasn't in a lot of detail, but the committee has seen the structure and at least the categories.
No, that's great because Director Aja may refer to the spreadsheet or I just want to make sure there's a connection. Before I turn it over to Joe, I just would like to also share with the committee during this presentation. I think there's some common areas or some common themes that I'm starting to see as commissioner. And one is cost of project, what's going on out there in the workforce, as far as suppliers and certain materials, certain types of projects. And Joe will highlight this a little bit, where we really need bigger lead times or it may impact the cost, because it's still happening in the environment. So if we give you an estimate today, and we don't build it for 2 years, or some of the product pre-order those, we would probably more than likely see an increase in the cost of project. And that is just being fed from workforce, skilled workforce, number of projects, size of projects that are out there to bid, and certain materials. So as a commissioner, working with Joe, and we're also working with the AGC, we've put together a building committee team. I guess that's what we would
Mhm.
call it. We're actually looking at all of those to see if there's different ways we could bid projects or what's really going on in the industry so we can advance ours. And that's really from a policy perspective. So you may hear us talk about that a little bit more. And then there you will see an overview on especially this category in building reuse, planning, and contingency. We haven't had a lot of movement in funds, but I want to bring it up now instead of interrupting Joe. That we are actually strategically saying some of these other projects that we need to do some analysis more on, how do we use that money and advance that and advance some of these projects. So I think there'll be more discussion around that. And with that, I will stop and let Joe take over the presentation, and thank you.
Okay. I'll share my screen. As Richard said, this is for phases of from design through to the point of construction. Programming is up first. Remember, programming has also been known as planning and pre-design. This is the beginning of a project where you're starting to get an understanding of what that project is about from the client's point of view. Sometimes BGS is their own client, sometimes it's other agencies and departments. So what you're looking at that point in time is how to define that project, the objectives of the project, the size of the project, that scope of work that's involved. So something as simple as, relocating somebody into a different room, different office, or construction design of a whole new building. But what does that mean? So you're looking at the number of people, how they interact, and the likes of that. So you're collecting this data. And then when you collect that data, you're also then looking at if it's an addition or new build, you're looking at the permit requirements for zoning and Act 250. We do have to do fire safety permits, so we also evaluate that when we're renovating an existing building along with new buildings. Once you gather all that information, you put a nice summary, and with that also comes an estimate of possible cost. And that's when you evaluate it and decide whether or not to move forward, look at the program itself, because it may be too expensive. And you might have to cut. Where could you cut? What's not needed? Or how can other things overlap when you look at the space? So for programming, once that's approved, you would then move into schematic design. The time frame of programming, though, depends on the size of the project, 6 to 14 months.
Would you prefer to have questions as you go?
Questions like those, fine.
Okay, and just because this is really probably the only time we're gonna talk about this process. And are there any questions about the process? So I just have one question on that, on the first part, is how many of these projects do you do in-house and how many of them do you contract for?
Right now, probably 99% of the work is contracted out
Okay,
because we're short of 5 project managers right now.
and do you have enough contracts to keep things going?
Yes,
Okay,
more than enough work.
yeah,
But I think what's really important here is that while you hear that 99%, you have to go back to the capital bill and say, how many spaces are we programming? because right now we're really looking at utilization. We're not building a whole lot of new buildings or doing some major work. And Joe, I think it's important because this talks about occupants. We do programming for a major heat plant or and that doesn't, it fits in this definition, but it's managed a little bit differently. And I don't know if you want to highlight that.
So with the buildings that BGS works on, they're not just office areas. It's a state house, public safety. We also do rest areas. We have heat plants. We have correctional facilities, courthouses. You know, it's really the full gamut of what you can do for construction. So when you are doing the programming, it may not just be for office space. We also program for public safety. You're not only looking for office space, but you're also looking for storage. We do storage, fire range down in Pittsburgh, fire safety training facility. So all that type of programming does come into play. Not all projects do require a programming phase. Sometimes it is somewhat simple to start right into schematic design.
Right.
Because it's so much easily defined. There's not always a fine line. Sometimes when you look at a program, it's like, you know, agency just gets 20 new people to start this new program. How are we going to fit? That's when you definitely want to be doing program.
Yes.
In the programming phase, you go through the budgeting aspect of it. I have known very few capital projects that have come in under budget. What is the process if it does go over budget, or what do you do in that?
At the programming phase, when somebody, and I've been asked multiple times, not yet by this commissioner, how, you know, here's an idea. What do you think the cost is?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going just through my knowledge of work and some rough square foot ideas, not really knowing the whole scope and going, this is what it could cost. Then you get into the programming phase, and when that starts defining it, it's still a very high level that we need this much square footage. That much square footage depends on the type of building that you're looking at, renovation costs, and even in today's economy, when you're picking, I think just 10 years ago, if I told you it was going to be $350, $400, $500 a square foot to renovate, I'd be run out of town.
Yeah.
But that's what it's going for now. Back in the day it was, 100, 150 for nice class B plus space. So it has changed over time, and it changes. Each project depends on where it's located and what's involved. It can even change in that aspect, just because of right now the economy is just so up and down right now. So that drives it along. But if it is overpriced from what we were originally looking at, going, that's just too much money, then you go back and you look at your scope. You really have to be working with your client and the team and going, what do you really need to drive what your project is, what your scope is, and then looking at that from that point of view.
So you're telling me that it's pretty much once you just determine what that budget is, it's a hard cap, or do you have to go back to our funding mechanism to get more money?
The commissioner's ready.
Yeah, I wanted to just partner up with Joe on this.
Yes.
First of all, I think that, projects on time are probably more critical. What we know in the construction industry, and we build into our cost estimates that we're going to present to you, is there's always a contingency to help with that. Part of what I'm experiencing as commissioner and what Joe and I are talking about is if we bring to you a project and we tell you it's $1 million, and we don't get authority to build it for 3 years, I'm not going to bring that project in at $1 million. So a response to part of your question is, we have to ensure that our estimates align with the true construction timeline and that we're building those numbers in. You give us some flexibility in the capital bill, which is greatly appreciated, and we don't want you to change that on contingencies. But I think, and what Joe, because I'm looking at Joe at projects and stuff and asking him, and I think our numbers, we're seeing a higher increase. Is that the way to say it, Joe? Or just general condition increase on projects has gone up since we.
Material conditions, material cost. sometimes on a daily basis.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's what we haven't probably, that's what we're trying to capture right now. So I will say to Joe, give me your best idea on what the cost of it is. But whenever I present or Joe presents to you a number, we're going to emphasize this is today's dollar. Because I think that's really important. Because what we said we could build 3 years ago for $300 a square foot might be $750 a square foot today.
mhm.
And then the other piece that I just want to build off what Joe's saying, because I think it's really important, is that when we're looking at programming and it's including state services and people, we like a process that lets them expand. Tell us your vision. What are you trying to accomplish? When those numbers come in and it doesn't fit, because I'm just, it's 40% more than what we had done on the back of the napkin that we just talked about. We need to go back to those agencies or those departments and say, you've got to prove you can afford this, because operationally on the budget, we have to look at it from the capital perspective. And we may have to bring it back into our guidelines. And that's the other thing. We have space guidelines that Joe and his team use. And sometimes programming goes outside of that. It's very, I don't know how you would describe it. Some departments understand that, but they still push because they want more. And that's really the tool that we have to use. So it's a balance. It's really between the agency, buildings and general services, and working with the legislature and working within the confines of the capital bill.
Just a second, I want to see if Senator Major has his.
No, I was gonna
cut
say
in.
to your point, materials, labor, just that daily can go up, and that was the origin of that question.
Okay, Senator Angles.
So being historical on this committee, I have been very happy with the initial number of BGS for most times. And where we run into problems is because they're not working on new construction. They're working on old buildings. And once they crack into something, they see it's more severe than what it was when they started. And therefore, okay, well, we didn't know that. We broke into that roof and we thought that we were just gonna be able to do a new roof, but now we see that we gotta do a new subsection, or we gotta do something like that. And that is where I've seen most of the times where they've come back to us and say, we don't know until you get started, but now we see this and this is why we need more money. We see that probably more times than not having it done accurately from the beginning. It's just more work once we broke into it.
Okay, great. So now let's move to the next.
Schematic design is up next. So this is where you're taking your program and you're starting to glue blocks and circles together. Who interacts with them throughout the whole project? So you want to know if it's an office space, where do those 20 people go? Do they all have to sit together? Do they need to be by a computer room? Do they need, all of that, how is grouped together? And with that, you then are starting to define your space of how much square footage you really need because of that. And with that, you're also looking at whether it's a renovation, construction, how that's really going to look. You're starting to formulate that floor plan, sketching it out on paper. Sometimes it may, if it's an addition to a building, you're looking at some sketches of the facade, the elevation of what it's going to look like, because that also is going to bring out potential zoning requirements that you're having to live within height, depth, setback, the likes of that. And then, so with all of that, you're now building a greater detail of the space, but it's not well defined yet. So it would be that, if we're looking here in the State House, the Senate wants to be with the Senate, the House wants to be with the House, everybody wants to be by the cafeteria. How does that whole thing work? That's where you just draw those bubbles and squares. And once everybody looks at it, the client looks at it and goes, yes, this is what I'm looking for and I'm envisioning. You then also get in an estimate because you're now defining what that square footage is. It's closer instead of something I need, 2,000 square feet. We're down to, we think we can do it 1,500. And now you're starting to move forward. So that whole process takes 5 to 15 months. And again, it's all timing, depends on size of the project, And also how many times you have to go back, because at this point in time, it can be, that's too much square footage. You can't afford it. You can't afford it. So then we have to regroup. Is that another story? Is that, is it shared space? Does that, everybody needs their own conference room, if they're only utilizing it once a week. So then you're looking, can it be shared? And then you're reducing your square footage that way to bring it down to a reasonable budget. Any questions on schematic design? Design development is where everything's now starting to come together. You've your lecture program, you've got your schematic design, who needs to be next to who, and how that whole flow is working. Now you're actually drawing floor plans to see how it's going to work. During this phase, you also find out that some things that you thought of didn't work, especially in renovation. You were thinking that this space is only going to need 400 square feet for that group to function in. And once you start laying it out on paper and going, these are the rooms I need, it doesn't work. So how does that then work inside of the existing facility? When it's new, it's not as bad, other than the overall square footage could then be shoved out, and then you got to regroup again. So you're taking that back in that you've learned from talking to your client, seeing what's on paper, and bringing it all together and trying to stay on budget. You're refining it now because you're also listing what your materials are going to be. So now you're looking at, if it's a new building, what is that exterior siding going to be? The roof is going to be, foundation, stuff like that. You need a full foundation. All that now comes into place. You're really defining what's in there. You're not designing it. You're just saying that we want a brick facade. We want a metal facade. We want an attic. Air handlers go in the attic, stuff like that. And you bring it all together, you come up with yet another estimate. And you have to evaluate that again. Are we, we come from programming, schematic design, are we on budget? If not, the reasons why, and what can we go back and evaluate? This is the time to look at it, go, and you can't afford to work excited. We're looking at something else. If it's an existing building that you're talking about, we're going, okay, like putting an addition onto the skate house, you don't want aluminum siding. So it's that added cost to pick something of the same period, whether it's granite or something of stone, masonry, that cost is there. So where else can you make those decisions on how to reduce the cost? It's not always easy, so it's not always light, but that's all we're trying to stay within the budget. Any questions on the design development? So with everything that you learn, now you get into the construction documents phase. And this is where everything comes together that you've been working on in very detailed. So now the detail is how wide are the corridors, size of the rooms, what type of doors you're having, what type of windows, ceilings, carpet, paint, everything now comes in under this phase. Because this is what you're going to bidding out to contractors on. So everything has to be detailed. Not only the plans, what's not covered in your plans, it's covered in other specifications. So when you're looking at specifications, you're defining, and here if we were to pick the table, you're going to lay out the size of the table, also the types of legs, everything that you see in this table, drawers, how it functions, that's what you need to detail for either on your drawings or in your specifications. The finishes, the type of paint, the door hardware, everything that you don't necessarily even see inside of the building, everything behind the walls, above the ceilings in the basement is also defined. Size-wise, functionality, and how it interacts with everything else. Buildings now have become very technical. Certainly with heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. Because it all now depends on, how many people in the room, or airflow comes into the room, temperature outside, stuff like that. On-occupant cycles, everything into place. So that in itself becomes its own area that has to be dealt with and planned for. Sometimes it can be a little bit too much. Sometimes it's not enough. All of this then becomes your bid document, your plans and your specification, defining that scope of work. And it's for your contractors who are bidding this to clearly understand everything that you need, and they put a price to it. and then they're going to submit that price. This is also the same amount of time before you go out to bid as your permitting is being completed. Sometimes through permitting, you go back to the drawing board because things don't go or allowed through permitting. So then you have to reevaluate it, again, size of the building, landscaping, color, site, noise, stuff like that. Then you get your bids. And that's really when you find out what your project is worth, whether you like it or not. We have been, over the years, relatively good at estimating. Through COVID has really, with people not going to work, materials hard to come by, has really put a strain on estimating. During the COVID time, we bid out the Williston Public Safety Facility, and we carried about $4 million in allowances. Because during that time frame, contractors for steel or material suppliers for steel and lumber was the cost when they dropped it off that day. They wouldn't give you a cost. They knew you needed it. In comes a truck. Here's your invoice. You either pay it or not, because then they'll unload it. So that was tough. We actually did quite well. We didn't need probably 50% of our contingency. Because that was also about the point in time that things were coming back to, which I guess the new normal right now with the higher prices, but it wasn't as bad as we anticipated because there's a lot of wood and steel for that project. So that was a bonus. Sometimes, you know, when you have big day, you have 4 or 5 contractors and they're all different in price. So what are they getting for prices and the likes of that? So we try our best and we're not, you know, I like to be in that range, but not always.
So I think one thing that Joe just said is that, you know, things are settling. I don't think we know what the new norm is. I still think it's based on looking at the data. It's really like this, and we're starting to come in to the new norm. You know, I just had we had a conversation back in December with an architect who designed a basic office building, sheetrock, nothing glorious about it. Came in at $1,000 a square foot. I think we built the Berlin Hospital for about $1,000 a square foot. And that is secure walls. I mean, you know, everything that goes behind it. So I think the new norm is starting to settle. I think Joe's highlighting some of the things where we're seeing the differences between common bidders, that there can be a significant difference. And what do they know that we don't know? So because things are settling, or are we still having an offshoot because of some of the flooding and those demands? And we honestly don't know, but I would like to see it level out a little bit for us. I think Joe would too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
And then are you getting multiple bidders for projects?
No, right now, so there are some projects that we did 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And then even then, we may only get one. We have a project going out to bid the HVAC, the air conditioning for correctional facilities. Pre-bids tomorrow. We had, because we're not going to all the buildings. This is for construction management, so that'll be the firm working with the state, acting on our behalf to actually construct this. One bidder has signed up for this team's meeting, and I heard that about 9 o'clock this morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I was talking to the project manager to go out and, you know, call some of these other people, contractors who've done business with it. You know, did you miss it? What? 2 others have signed up since to attend. So it's difficult, and a lot of what we're hearing back is it's about bidding. It's a lot of money for a contractor to put a bid together. You know, they spend time doing all the takeoffs, all the material and everything that's needed to build this project. And if they don't get it, they're losing money. There's more than enough work out there now because there's not enough people in the trades doing this work. So that's some of it. Some of it, you know, it's not an office space in a nice green field. It's in a correctional facility, a lab, public safety. A lot of these facilities require background checks. So not all of their employees can work inside of this facility. So that sort of holds them up a little bit. You know, what's the team I'm putting forth in doing that in that whole time frame? What do they have for other work? Not with just us. So it's tough.
It is, and I think this is one of the examples of working with the AGC, members of the committee that we just kicked off last week, I think. And working with industry saying, can we do something different on how we bid or how we package projects? So we've started those conversations. We won't have solutions for those, and we've got a couple meetings in February, but we're really cognizant of what's going on and how it's impacting. Sky isn't falling, but where is that level playing field?
Great.
Then after I start jumping, it's our bidding time frame, depending on the size of the project. 2 to 4 months. Sometimes it can be less in this project, but sometimes it's even greater. If we're doing the women's correctional facility reentry, that's such a large project. You would want a month and a half, 2 months for a contractor to be reviewing the drawings and putting a bid together because it is so large. So what they have to do is we start out, we advertise the job, allow contractors to see that it's available. We do a pre-bid. So that pre-bid is typically a walk through the site so the contractors can see what the site looks like and have any questions. Because some of them have looked at the drawings in advance. And when they're on the field, they go have questions. This doesn't look right in line. We also, depends on like working in a correctional facility. Correctional facility, I like to use that as an example because if you take a door that's in your house or in an office building, not this building, a regular office building, a metal door or a wood door, you know, it's 100 pounds, light frame, steel, trim. You go to a correctional facility, you go from a 20 gauge frame to a 12 or 14 gauge frame. So it's almost a quarter inch. So it takes 2 to 3 people to be able to maneuver that to get it into place. That frame gets anchored and or you take mortar and fill in the void. That's the wall. So it's a lot more involved in detail. There's an existing facility. It's about getting processed to get in, to get out. All the tools that go to a correctional facility are accounted for. There's a list. The officer checks off the list as you're going in. You better have that on the way out. Otherwise, the facility has to shut down. And you'll try and find that tool. So that can take, depends on the size of your crew, take a half hour, take an hour. So if you never worked in a correctional facility before, there is that process. We understand that, but some contractors do not. So you gotta, you know, when you're looking for new contractors at a correctional facility, you want smaller, easier jobs, something that they can understand that and get in, get their feet wet, and then be able to give bid on the larger jobs coming forward. We get our bids back, we review them, we look at the cost. When there's no bid, that's difficult. You don't know what went wrong. We do call around at times, you know, why didn't you bid? So it's a time frame. You know, they don't have time in their budget, in their process. Their idea of the budget is maybe greater than what we were looking at. So these are the things that we have to then analyze. When you have 4 or 5 bidders, it's pretty relatively easy, even whether it's below your estimate or above your estimate. There's a nice grouping. That's great. There have been jobs that we've had come in that for no particular reason, there's, you know, on, let's say $1 million job, there's a $200,000 difference between the low bidder and the next bidder. And you're going, why? As the commissioner was saying earlier, we don't know that. What do they know? Do they have it in on material? Something like that? No idea. We typically will go with a low bid, some responsible bid. So we do, you know, we call them up to make sure that what they saw, they bid correctly, the price is good. Then you move on to construction. Construction is relatively straightforward. We have a clerk on the works on the jobs, then the eyes and ears for the project manager. They're there typically every day. They are there to review to make sure that the contractor builds the project in accordance with plans and specifications. The project manager stops in once a week, bi-weekly, depends on the job. It's a large job. The beginning of the job, you're there almost weekly. And at the end of the job, you are in the middle. You're there almost bi-weekly because there's so much work going on that it doesn't change that much. But that's what applicable works is for. Then you come into occupancy. Prior to occupancy, as you're doing a final walkthrough, which called known as a punch list. The punch list is, there's a ding in the wall, you're missing a plate cover here. Bigger than that, somebody scuffed up the roof. All that has to be fixed up before you're making your final payment. And you're moving people in what's known as substantial completion. That's the time when the state has beneficial use of the space. We have done multiple projects where there are 2 or 3 substantial completions because the job's finishing in the winter. I can't complete the site work, but I can move everybody to the office space and they're using it. We'll have a second one in the springtime to do the exterior work. Our contractor then is producing at that end of the substantial completion period, the as-built, also known as record drawings and markups. What they're doing is, if this door here was located out in the field on a different wall, they're marking that on the drawings. If the air handler is in a different location, outlets, circuit breakers, all of that gets marked down, and then we get that so that when we renovate in the future, we have this information because everything is in there. The best thing I've seen to date now is 3D cameras, because even as good as you are, you never know what's behind the wall if you cut a hole in or dig a hole in the ground. That's when we also get our manuals on how to use things, how the buildings function, and then commission. Commissioning is everything that moves is to be checked. So you have people going through, and this is on all projects, correctional facilities, labs, mental health facilities would be high on that list of going through, making sure, the doors function properly, that they lock. So in a correctional facility, that's very important. You don't want the one, like at home, if you just put the little bit in latches, it can't do that. So then you're kind of like contractor back in. The whole air handling system is the same thing, goes through commissioning, making sure it all functions. The hard part is the 2 seasons. You can't have spring and summer, winter and summer at the same time to check the air conditioner at full load and really getting it full load. So sometimes we come back in 6 months to do that. And that's basically the job. Still after 1 more year, and then years of warranty period. So if anything breaks, we have a 1-year warranty. For the manufacturer, if it fails, they come back in and they fix it. Those are the phases of design and through construction.
Great. Any questions?
And the last phase it mentions bringing everything together to occupy and maintain the facility. Is there a separate process or plan for each project where you have a maintenance schedule or maintenance?
Our operations and maintenance personnel will be there for the sort of the final walkthrough and training. So anything mechanically they get their training on. Sometimes it's special flooring, and it can be as simple as marmoleum. Doesn't like to be waxed. So they have all that information in what's known as the operations and maintenance manuals. If it's something special, they are then trained on it.
Okay. So there's an operations and maintenance
Yes.
manual for specific for each building or
Each project gets it.
Okay.
So, and I think this is a great connection back to the overview
Yeah.
that we did. And, you met John Keeber. He is the director of maintenance, and there's a slide that shows the state and all of his district facility offices. That's the transfer, right? That's where the knowledge gets transferred. Because design and construction sees the oversight of building it, planning it, building it, contracting. And then the long-term maintenance moves over to that division, which is 215 employees. So those people who work in that district office, to Joe's point, are going to be the people that are trained.
and John was the one who was sitting in Port Emily.
Correct.
Yes.
See, we all make connections
BGS shirt on.
with the BGS shirt on, his identity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we heard a lot about just how wonderful he is last year,
Yeah.
in terms of keeping things going. Let me ask you a question about IT, because this committee is going to have IT in our jurisdiction. So how do you evaluate, just a lot of the systems now are, technologically enhanced, right? I
Yes.
mean, some are just technology, but then the HVAC,
The
there's a lot of
HVAC
technology.
system,
So how do you handle that? And are you looking at similar systems or and
for the HVAC systems, we have direct digital control, otherwise known as DDC. And that is really the computer brains behind everything, so that the thermostat tells whenever up or down, tells the valve to open or close. All that's done on a different server. So we have 6 servers right now with 6 different companies set up throughout the state.
of 6 different companies? That's what I was getting at.
Yes.
Okay, so do you ever spec one of those companies?
We do not,
Are companies or servers, Joe?
they're companies who are on that server. So each company has its own separate server to function off of. We do not, unless it's a renovation,
Mm-hmm.
then you would say this is the system that's in there, and nobody else is going to be bidding it because we don't want a second system in there.
Mhm.
That overlap. If it's a brand new building or completely redoing it, then it's open to those individuals.
Okay, let me just ask, I was just gonna ask, are you comfortable with the way things are being processed now? How the process works to manage the IT part of your work?
And in the equipment to the people in the field, or
Well,
with
just,
like a department, the agency of,
well,
Interservice.
we're determining what our jurisdiction is going to be and what our focus is going to be. And just now, I thought of this aspect of it. So I'm hitting you cold, but let's talk about this at some point in a more structured way.
Yes, but if I could just back to I think it's really important that ADS sets standards. And so if we're gonna go to the cloud, if they have standards, they have security standards that we need to comply with. But I'm gonna take you back to last week when we talk about energy and we talk about systems. We are very conscious. I think you saw some of the data and the reporting. That applies in our standards and our expectations of buildings. So it's not about this IT system to operate it. We have energy standards and expectations in the world of construction. And I'm going to use the digital, aspect. This is what we expect. So when we put that project out to bid, I'm going to call them the energy standards are there. And we're very consistent with that so we can operate consistently. If we want to talk about our contracts and about the security and about the cloud and that, then we should be partnering up with ADS because they have very specific expectations for us. And that's your world, the new world of corrections, and it's now it's institutions and technology.
Right.
Right.
IT and institutions, right? So, yeah, so that is more of a conversation, but I expect we will be having that conversation with you. It makes sense.
Right.
Even though
They don't-
like the other IT committee in the House doesn't have institutions.
Correct.
They're
Correct.
IT and energy. So actually, if you all, do you testify in that committee at all?
So I have, no,
Okay.
I don't, BGS has not done any significant technology investments using there's the statute and the ABC forms and the protocol. They've done some projects, but it hasn't necessarily, based on my research, been under that review. I'm working very closely with the Secretary of ADS to ensure that we have the technical support as a department as we advance. So we've got some really good synergy going on there. I do think it's important when you look at the scope of work and what you're going to oversee. That we're not getting into specific building IT decisions because it's the systems that we're putting out to bid it's the tools they give us to manage those systems, which typically would not be under that jurisdiction.
Right.
Yeah, so it could get a little cloudy, but we don't
No
want
pun
it
intended.
to.
Okay,
So,
right, okay.
but along
That's
the line,
helpful.
the DVC system, that server, standalone location, and then it's working with ADS so that we can actually access that. So otherwise, if it standalone, it can make the whole building function. We would just have to be on site to make that happen. ADS comes in so that we can actually do it from afar and see it. So this way, takes out work on mechanical engineers can actually be analyzing things at his desk and talking to people in the field and go, you know, this is what I'm seeing is the valve open.
Right,
There are a lot of times when the wires get connected and falling off, and everybody go, you know, we're freezing and why? Computer says everything's gone, valve wide open. Well, it's not. But that's where ABS comes in, so that interaction to that server, so we can see from the front.
right. Okay, great. That's helpful. All right, now, is this where we transition to the project updates?
Yeah, yes.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
It's easy to kill.
Okay. It's good that you were able to do this.
Probably be better. So this is the updates and status of the last biennium FY 24 through 25 capital bill, starting with section 2. First up is major maintenance. For major maintenance is for, you know, small to large projects throughout the state on our state office buildings, from replacing pumps to roofs. We work off of a work order system. Anybody can be putting in a work order. And then my program chief meets with the district facility managers in each of the districts on a biannual basis to go through that list of work orders and to prioritize them. There's always emergencies and rush projects that, you know, the door fell, gotta fix it. It's hanging by the full hinges, somebody hit it. We can make that work. Because she reserves money for the time to do that. Otherwise, we're producing every 6 months a list. Some of that is also deferred. So we're only given so much money. We prioritize the list. If something emergencies come up or the project takes more than what we initially thought, then that price is put together. Something drops off the bottom, that becomes deferred maintenance and goes on the list next time around. So as I said earlier, here in the bulleted items, you can see, you know, state houses, general office space, special facilities, information centers. We work with Vermont Transportation with that, police barracks, courthouses, and labs. We have 3 labs, so that a wide range of projects and different skills. My project managers, most of them could work across all of these, but not all of them. There are specialties out there for labs and correctional facilities. In 24, we had 198 work orders that came through that we were looking at. Here's the dollar amounts for the number of work orders per district across the state. Some of those are somewhat simplified, so they go on the list. You know, it can be replacing a walk, door, as I said, roof. And then that goes into that whole process, the design phases. Replacing a roof, you don't have to do the programming. Now, though, because of the energy code, you are getting into a little bit of design development and schematic design, because you might have to hire a structural engineer because you're adding more insulation. You're adding more insulation and the structure hold that additional snow load.
So I think this list is really important, members of the committee. So this comes back from that district, those maps. So the work orders come in from the DFMs and the staff because maybe they've found something at the Bennington, the state office building. So that's where they originate. And to Joe's point, and then we have an internal evaluation where we identify its major, because some of it we may go fix right away. You know, so there's some flexibility. We have that within the programming. But what this ends up creating for those areas is this is really true deferred maintenance, and this is something we have to adjust. And this is what it's looking like. And this feeds into Joe's planning and building the capital bill.
All right, and just this is repairs that are of a certain dollar amount or longevity so that they qualify as capital?
Yes, otherwise we're doing, operations and maintenance, would be replacing it by their workforce. Sometimes there's a crossover because of the size of the project, you know, a 20 gallon per minute pump could put you over that limit that they can be doing. So then they're working at that, but it's a pump, should be lasting for 20 years. Major maintenance is paid for. When it dies, you gotta replace it now. It doesn't go on the deferred list.
Okay.
You know, when you're looking at typically one roof leak doesn't get your roof replaced unless it's a real severe roof leak. But otherwise, you know, it's on the list. That one may get bumped because it's easily, you know, we patched it. Normally there's like 5 to 10 patches before you go into replacing a roof. So that does happen. Sometimes it's just end of life. And at that end of life, that's what shows up here. End of life is boilers. Everything has an end of life. Some things die at their end of life or sooner. Boilers, roofs, you know, carpet, typically paint, ceiling tiles in the category of, you know, even though they're going to last 40 years, they last a lot longer than it is. You know, some floorings do. It all depends where it is throughout the building and how this year.
So another question, that's the pink lady, right? A couple of years ago?
No, this
No?
here is 10 Baldwin Street,
10 volt.
down here to the west side of the State House,
Okay,
just beyond
so,
the brick building, 6 Baldwin.
so in something like that, where it's pretty significant, would you put in ADA? Just make it ADA compliant?
Cut.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what the work is. If that's paint, lead paint, we wouldn't be touching ADA, right?
We're in.
Well, there's probably a
However-
threshold where you would,
This is the right
Right.
picture for you because yes,
Okay.
ADA was included. So there is a new ramp. If you look where the individual is standing in
Yeah.
green and the yellow, there's a new accessible ramp going in. This here is 4 work orders that came together to try and get a better price. So we did the roof, we did some replacing the siding, repainted, addressed the accessible ramp because the ramp itself was non-compliant. So all that got done under one project, and instead of doing 4 different projects, we brought them together.
okay,
They were originally planned for different times. But then when we got this individual, the project manager was like, hey, you know, you're taking these for, go get a contractor and get all this work out together. So we do that also. Sometimes we'll look at a building if we're going in to replace the roof. You're also going to be looking at the insulation. If it's a flat roof, whether or not there's insulation of the pitch roof, the type of pitch, the valleys, whether it's just an overlay or replacement. And then like in a case like this, was also the building peeling. So it was like, let's do it all at once to get it done. Not everything can be combined because sometimes, you know, when you're dealing with a pump in a building or an air conditioner, it's not the same as getting a roof done. So combining those 2 projects don't always fit together. This one did.
okay.
The chimneys were also repaired on this project. So
If I.
Yes.
And forgive me if you've covered this already, because I've left something. When you go to bid out for project manager or, our Vermont, construction, crews, are they given preferential treatment or strictly?
it's the simplest one, low bid, it's straightforward, low bid wins. There is provision in our documents to state all things being considered, basically if there's a tie, you know, the tie should go to the Vermonter. I've never had a tie. So I don't have to worry about that. I don't know how you do that.
I think it's important though, the title is very clear. It's low responsive bidder, not just low bidder. So we may look, Joe may come with a recommendation of going to the second highest bidder because they were more responsive in the detail and their cost estimation. And, you know, that's the evaluation that they go to. But I think it's fair to say, right now, the majority of our projects are Vermont businesses. We don't have a lot of I mean, Pittsburgh Galley has,
PC's in state.
they're
up
in
and down
state,
the
but
East
they're
Coast.
also, they have business in New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, but they're in state, but we typically don't. Subs may be coming from out of state. Maybe that's what you could highlight on, Joe. Which we don't control.
Yeah.
Right, it also depends on what part of the state you're in, you know, if you're central Vermont, typically local. When you get up to border towns, you may get others. We do have a firm, a roofer out of Albany, New York. You wouldn't know it because he'll be here at 6 o'clock on the job every single day, and they travel. I don't know how they pull it off, but they're good. They have been an issue. So by and large, we don't do that. There are some out-of-state subs, certainly when you're getting into specialties, labs and correctional facilities, there's more out-of-state firms.
So like
Subcontractors.
Hartford, Courthouse,
Yes,
which is right on the border.
yes,
That's you know,
that is DW Construction. But they also have a office in New Hampshire.
And some of their subs for what they aren't doing themselves may come from out of state.
Well, and some things are really helpful because if they're out of state, or not because they're out of state, but elevator repair is just really terrible to find. And I saw an elevator repair last year. That was a Massachusetts company up here. So I'm glad that they're in northern Massachusetts.
And they have, even though they're a Massachusetts firm, they have offices, local offices here.
Yeah.
So,
And I did just a heads up, David Sheets will be here at 3, so
Okay.
don't rush yourself on, you know,
uh,
yeah, but you'll,
that's,
we will go on the tour at 3, but you can come back on another day if you don't.
Okay. So here on this slide here, what you're seeing is the amount appropriated in FY 24 and FY 25 and how much of the funds that we have expended, encumbered, and what those balances are. What happens is why you see a balance of funds in FY 24 is with curricular works and design specifically. Sometimes with a construction manager job, also you have allowances. So what happens is the job closes out. There's that remaining fund, well, it goes back in. And then my program chief, Lauren Washburn, will go and then assign those funds to another project throughout the year. So that ebbs and flows. And about note on this slide also is in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see sort of a yellowish slide, and then you see sort of looking down the ductwork. This is inside of a correctional facility. The yellowish slide on the left is the amount of dust and debris that's inside the ductwork. And on the right-hand side has been cleaned. We want to clean our ductwork in our correctional facilities every 5 years. It doesn't always happen that way, but they actually do get that included over time. Office buildings are not as bad. One of the issues in corrections is the type of blankets that they have, very friable, and that's what you see up here. Next up is physical security enhancements. This is card readers, camera systems, also panic lockdown buttons and systems like that. This is statewide. Both office owned state offices and leased space that we have control of. So this is where, you know, your door locks will come into play that are connected to the card access system. And this is not buying all new. This is somebody needs a door added, camera added, replace a camera here and there because it's failed, and the likes of that. If you're talking about technology, this here is what you're seeing on the right-hand side is the door control system. Each one of those blue boards controls just 2 doors. And so when you're looking at a lot of doors, we're walking through some of our buildings that have 20 doors on it. It's quite a panel. That there does run through the ADS system along with the camera systems so that they can see them at different locations throughout the state. Similar here, you see a balance in FY 24 of $100,000+, and that is just because, you know, they didn't spend as much on a project they anticipated on doing. Price came in better, and it just goes back in, and then they will expend it. statewide planning, reuse and contingency. So on the planning side of things, we try to use the funds for that when it's not a capital line item yet. Or just to get it in front of it to do that. So what do we really need? I went back to the planning program and study phase of, somebody's looking for space to use these funds to get out there and look at it. And we've done that in multiple locations, when we're looking at the courthouse in Newport of what to do. We've used some of that funds for that planning phase of it. Reuse is when we, BGS, or another agency needs somebody to relocate or refit up a space. The cafeteria that we were trying to reestablish in the basement of 133 was all pristine, ready to go. The day we opened it, the next day, let it wash it all away. But that is some of those situations we have empty space, how to reuse it, and we use the reuse funds of that. And then there's a contingency fund. And that is for a project that does go over, there's that ability to use these funds to help offset that overage. We have also here with the contingency funds in FY 24-25, there's also known as the cash fund. There's money in that also. Bennington Battle Monument down there, there's a lengthy program planning study underway because the stones are chipping away and falling off. There's a tremendous amount of moisture inside of that monument. So much so that a lot of it's on the inside freezes and there's actually a lot of ice buildup throughout the year. So what's happening is you're just sort of cleaving off. So we've installed a fence around the facility so you can't get close. So they've calculated how far a chip will fall, and that's the perimeter of the fence. There's also at the entrance a covered entryway. So if a piece does fall, it'll hit the covered entryway. So they're still open for business throughout the spring through fall. Like I said, they're on a big study for that, and I'd let Historic Preservation talk about that. But we were charged with putting the fence in for them, and that because it's a temporary fence until they get funding for their project. It means checking on once, twice a year.
Okay, did you have?
Joe, I'm obviously very interested in this one. So there's a study underway now on the renovation.
One of the studies that have been completed, there was a very engineering detail and whatnot. They went through and figured out exactly how much wind, what earthquake, whatever, and where this thing would break and topple over. It's safe. They calculated that, but what they're looking at now is really how to dry the building out before they can really start doing work on this. So they've had people start from the top, work their way down, sort of cleaning off every stone as they work their way around through a drone process and being on the building, the monument itself. They have actually cataloged every single crack that's in this building. It's very dry but interesting report. That's what you're looking for.
I saw some of it. Just send me the study if possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and go ahead and send it to all of us, please, or to committee assistant. You can put it on the website. Thank you. It's a great photo. Two great photos.
That's the one on the left is, as you're looking at the photo on the right, it's above the windows that are about 3/4 or more up on the monument itself, and that's above the elevator, and that takes you to the top. And if you're looking at the photo on the right, about an eighth from the top of the building on the right hand side, you'll see a little step out. Look like a mine, a little bump out. That's a platform. You get onto that platform, and you take the curved ladder to go change the light bulb at the top for FAA.
Yeah. Used to do that.
It's a very interesting height to go up all those stairs. It's another 100 and some odd feet. Brattleboro Courthouse roof replacement. This project's underway right now. Most of the roof, flat roof has been replaced. They're working on the metal roof now. It's also a courthouse. So you can't be making a lot of noise during court proceeding because here they're being, just like here, they're being recorded. So that's project manager, contractor working closely with the contractor as to, in the course, when you get into work and make noise. So a lot of times court doesn't start till 9, contracts like started at 7, sometimes they come in at 6 and start working earlier to get some of that noisy work done. But sometimes the days you just can't work. That too can increase the cost of the project. So right now, what you're seeing here, we have a balance of 120,000. So all of that project has been bought out. And that'll be completed in the spring of this year. But more with the roof, there was windows, fire alarm system. Again, this is sort of like, bundling everything together into the building, making it watertight, correcting the things for another 20-year life cycle.
They will appreciate that.
For note on that one, you mentioned Hartford. The courthouse is almost identical. Same architect, to recall the same contractor, but that one is going through a more expensive overhaul than the one down in Brattleboro, because Brattleboro was done 18 years ago, 2010, something like that, and had the inside really done. So Hartford's doing both inside and outside on this project. Middlesex master plan design and decommissioning for what was the Middlesex Therapeutic Community Residence. They moved on to a facility in Essex. During that time frame, once they moved out, we had an issue needing a space for juveniles. So we had temporarily fit up. It's only, and the space is not a great overhead photo, just above the Vermont symbol down at the bottom, going over the mountains. And that's trailers that have come together. It was put in there were a firm out of Maine doing it for medical trailers. So they brought them in, temporarily set them up. It was supposed to be 2 years, and this was after Irene. So last year we fit them up to hold 4 juveniles. And that's what that is used for now with GCF. So I mean that, project a little bit on hold. The building in the center, the little square one, was at the time public safety. They moved to Berlin. So that building now is vacant. The large building to your right is the Vermont State Archives and our PGS print postal shop. You say something?
I was
I thought you heard
thinking,
something.
but, well, you might be breathing over here.
Oh.
But,
Okay.
You read mine?
But this is the site that we're using until the future site that we're working with AHS on for
Correct.
the use. This is where they are at, and my understanding from Joe is, we spent some more money and hardened it up, and it's working. It just does not have the capacity and doesn't meet the future programming. Is that a fair
Is that true?
statement?
They're looking to hold 16 juveniles in their permanent facility, and this only holds.
And would 16 be the statewide need?
Yeah, this is one of the projects that you asked us to look at. We've been looking at property in Virgins. I think this is the connection to that long-term planning. This
Okay.
is your short-term until we get to the long-term and accomplish that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Did you?
We'll put your state house near to everybody's heart in the room, I suppose. Heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. So we've gone through over the past 2.5 years of updating the air handling units that are throughout this building. We have not finished. We've come to a set. So 2+ years ago, we replaced what was basically done in this wing, the original wing of the 1859 State House for the Senate. And now we've completed over the summer putting the rest of the 1859 State House and the annex, which is the 20s, 30s, and 40s, on the new air handler system. So with that, when it was installed back in the 70s and some in the 80s, it was designed for the airflow requirements back then. Standards have changed. Comfort levels have also changed. It's good and bad when you're having a thermostat that everybody can tweak a little bit, because depends on where you sit, next to the airflow, your hotter, colder, everything else, instead of that nice radiator radiating everything on. But that's where we've gotten to. Our next phases that we need to work on is in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. They have units, conduction units that are in the wall If we want to get the air handler ductwork above the ceiling, we'll have better control, because right now, if you go into the house, the conducting units, the air flows up. Typically, there's a bookcase or something that impedes that airflow, so it's cutting across. And so the people who are sitting in front of it are hotter or cooler than the people who are in the room. So we remove those and put the ductwork above in the ceiling to supply and return. We'll have one, be able to do more airflow, and two, have better control dispersion in the room. Right now, even though we have the newer handlers in place, if we turn them up, the ductwork is too small and it starts to rattle because that airflow. And that after our mold event, 17, I think what happened, we very humid summer. We found a lot of mold in the early 40s in the house. And a lot of these rooms here are also very damp. Damp enough that you take the moisture right off the chair. You know, the carpet. I mean, we can actively see the flame. So that we went through and put in deep in the summers. If you show up here, you see dehumidification. We put an addition on. If you're going under the ramp that takes you up to the cafeteria, look down to your right as you're going towards the cafeteria. There's a little bump out with some vent on top of that. That's making room in that mechanical space down below for a water to water heat exchanger. So what we're doing with that is your chilled water's cycling throughout the building. It's picking up that warm air and cooling it. We're capturing that heat to do more than that, because you have to super cool your air to bring the moisture out. But then it's typically 50, 55 degrees. You have to warm it back up for comfort. In a lot of our state office buildings where we don't have dehumidification, because we don't have summer boilers like here in the complex, we only heat in the winter. Typically, there's a lot of people in the space running computers, the lights are on, stuff like that. That provides that heat to offset that. Here in the State House, do not have that. Another issue that happened with that was that that was a special session also. If you came in June, thermostat was set for making everybody comfortable. Everybody went home and forgot to set thermostat back. But it's since that time also, our summers have been very humid and lengthier than just like 3 weeks in end of August. So that's also a concern. So that's also part of this whole process. We still have the speakers area and also the cafeteria that we still have to do along with the 40s, 30s, and 40s of moving it back overhead. However, we have to coordinate that with the potential State House expansion and how that interacts, because there's no sense buying air handlers that are oversized or undersized until we know what that is.
Okay.
So I think it's really important. That's where we're going. You'll see that we noted in here the State House expansion project, slide 25, because I don't think we'll get to slide 25 today. So you have funded the heating and ventilation and air conditioning has been a high priority. And as you know, the capital bill goes in phases. And Joe and his team have been working on this HVAC system for many years.
Yes.
I think that's fair to say. You funded in 24 and 25 a substantial amount of money. But what we have done to Joe, as he's talking about these pieces, we have not advanced we've not continued with the work. And he's at a comfortable place of hold, except for we do have a contractor that's waiting, because we need to, depending on which way you move forward with the State House expansion project, if you move forward with that, it has a direct impact on how, and that's what Joe was just talking about, how he aligns the remainder of this project with option A or option B. So we've been working really closely with your Sergeant at Arms on the expansion project. And, you know, there are multiple things that I don't know. There's a special committee. I'm not sure if that committee has to be reset because of the new biennium. But I think it's really important to know that we are not recommending, you need to do this work. We're not recommending that we do this and then come back, because I think Joe's expertise and his team are saying if we do an expansion in a year, I'm just using that as a guess, and we move forward with this, we may have to realign the work that that this does, and he's very concerned about that.
That makes sense. Thank you. Thanks for taking care of this building and our budget.
You're welcome. 133 State Street renovations for the legislature IT. So they were housed in 9 Baldwin. And also a few locations here in the State House, and on the first floor, right-hand side, it's coming from the front lobby, exiting out towards the northeast wing. They're on the right-hand side of the corridor. They have their space. They do have their servers there that are on the left-hand corner of the back end, the hallway. So they have moved in and we're substantially complete. It's just about done that project, just wrapping things up. Newport Courthouse replacement planning and design. We have funding to move forward. We have completed some of the planning phase using the planning funds. We need to continue that, but we're at standstill because we found no property. Anybody coming forward with property anyways, there was a reasonable price inside the downtown area. So it's really where to go next. Do we reevaluate our needs to stay in the downtown? Do we need to look at, there was a study done years ago, 2014 perhaps, that looked, this here is was known as the Superior Court as opposed to the County Court that's next door, put an addition in between. A lot of that addition was about really leveling up both buildings and providing an accessible entryway that had multiple elevators in there and stairways because of the different elevations. Right now, judiciary is the only one in this building. Probation parole has moved out, and so has the state's attorney.
So I think it's important, probation, and I need to share with this committee. I toured this with Chief Justice Reiber before I left, and I was in awe to see it was still on the list. 2 historic buildings, one is ours and the other is owned by
The county.
and so with that, trying to find the appropriate location for such an important building and court. And we have not, when Joe says, what do we do next? One thing I have not done is gone back with the courts and said, we really didn't get any viable. So you directed us to try to find land. And we've gone out. So we have not met to strategize. Do we want to go back out again? Do we really want to push looking at it within downtown Newport? And that has not, those conversations have not occurred, which is on my list.
Okay, Senator Ingles.
I can tell you the conversations locally as far as within that building, especially with Judge Tebow and Judge Zone, would be to do exactly what the option 2 was, I believe, which was to combine those 2 courthouses together and to do something within the structure of that versus to move it to buy land or to move it outside of it. The problem with Newport's going to be is that they're going to have 2 historic buildings that they're not going to be able to do anything with. That should they move it out, outside of it, and I think the preference is. And Judge Tebow has I don't know where he's gone with it, but has a very detailed plan about what we would do to combine those 2 buildings together and to keep them right there. So I'm sure you'll be hearing more of that.
Yes, and again, I'm my style is to work with judiciary to see, it goes back to this is the connection again. And I will stop saying this, I promise you, by March, but back to the planning, back to that guideline. The first thing we do is planning. And so we started the planning and it didn't work. We need to go back to our partners and say, what is in the best interest? Because the state owns one property and Newport owns the other property. And you get into this whole other level of ownership and who builds and who owns and who invests. So, but I am looking forward. I would love to see Newport have the best updated court building that works around everything in my time.
Sure. So Senator Ingles, I just want to understand what you said. So when I was up there recently, folks were talking about having that be residential if it's not a court building anymore. But are you saying that the judiciary once.
The judiciary, Judge Tebow and Judge Zone would like to stay right where they're at, combine the two buildings together if at all possible, or at the very least, put the elevators on the outside of the building or whatever. I think the appropriate conversation would probably be to stay as the commissioner has said, is to go back to judiciary and have that conversation with them. They have a very detailed and very big thought process as far as where it is. As far as the city is concerned, they're adamant about a couple things. One is that the courthouse should stay downtown. And the other is that it should not go into what we would call the hole that's there, because they don't want a government building in that hole. They would rather have something that's revenue producing there. So I think the community and the justices that are there have a strong preference of reworking that courthouse to make it modern and keeping it in where it's at. But again, I don't want to get ahead of the commissioner. I know she'll do with what they do, and the conversations will be ongoing.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
So we're
It's a
back.
beautiful building. Whatever it goes on the inside, it's wonderful.
Yeah, site's really limited. That's part of as you well know. And as you know, I mean, the site and the safety, yes, but yeah.
And nearby, we have, oh no, not
No.
nearby.
Not across the
Across
state.
the other side of the state.
I think we
Yeah.
crossed 2 lakes to
Yeah.
get here, didn't we? Or just one.
Northwest, not, yeah, that's true.
The Northwest State Correctional Facility, where you're looking to do multiple roof replacements at this facility. Some of them are shingle, some of them are membrane roofs. They also need the trim replaced, and the reason for that is, again, the updated energy code. We are adding insulation to the roof to meet those energy standards. When older buildings were constructed, even some of the newer ones today, your vent stack is an easy one to envision, is only so high. When we add additional 4 inches of insulation to that, your vent stack becomes only like 6 inches, and that's too short. But what's worse in some of these locations is you have air handling equipment sitting on the flat roofs. All those have to be filled up at 4 inches, otherwise they'll be too close to the roof, less of that. So this is an instance where I get to say where we had 2 bids. One for this project came in at 1.9 million. The other one came in at 500,000. So you're looking now going, somebody's wrong.
Yeah.
And we got 2.
Yeah.
If you have a third, you at least have a better idea.
Right.
So it was really evaluating and talking to both of them, and we decided to put the project back out to bid to try to reduce that scope. The difficulty in some of the correctional facility works is on some of our buildings, we had razor ribbon that's on those, and the roofer has to remove that to then replace the roof and then put it back. Certain roofers don't like playing with that stuff. It is very nasty to work with.
Gotcha.
So we were in that process now of reevaluating it. St. Johnsbury, to the east side of the state, Northeast State Correctional Facility, and the Caledonia Community Work Camp. 2 separate facilities roughly on the same property. And what we're doing is door control replacement. We started several years ago in Newport. With corrections, we identified a system. Corrections had visited several facilities out of state to see what they had for a system. Because the ones you see here were good old tried and true, it's a push button in terms of, red, green, and yellow. Depends on what the similarity switches tell you. Now it's all some electronic touch screens and computers. So you have control of so much more than just a door and a switch. It also controls the camera. So when you're looking at a camera, you can touch that camera, and up on your screen, you actually see what's happening there. Somebody pushes a button to go through a door, that camera automatically comes on, so you see that individual on the door. So it depends on both sides of the door. So during that time frame, also what we're doing is we are looking at doing, since we end up closing a wing or a unit, depending on which facility you're in, to get this work done, because some of the doors have to be overhauled. We also do major maintenance work while we're in there. When we were in Newport, I can't remember now, Springfield, Southern State Correctional Facility was also done, but I know the congratulated individuals who were helping us with some painting. We were purchasing the paint, they went in there and actually painted the unit while it was down. So we try to get all of our major maintenance work done in there at that time also, because some of them are 2 stories tall. You know, we change out the lights sometimes just through staging or lift. Great time to be tackling that.
So can I just, this is a great example, if I can, that Joe and I started talking with the AGCs to see, this goes back to your early questions about project cost and scope and getting people to look at them. So this is an example of the type of things they asked us to look at. Like, could we consolidate all of our projects that are door replacement projects in correctional facilities? Unfortunately, we don't think it's going to work because of the sensitivity around the building. Is that the right way to describe it, Joe? But to see if we could get better, and we're still exploring it, but it just goes to the earlier conversation. These are the types of things that we're looking at. Could we get work done faster? Could we get a better dollar amount? Could we consolidate? Because Joe, and I'm going to ask you, you know, the way he articulates it, a door frame or a door in a correctional facility is pretty much a door project in a correctional facility. It's, you know, unique to that. Is that?
That's correct.
Yeah. So that's just an example of some of the stuff that we're trying to do, because, you know, these projects are tough getting them off the ground right now. Is that a fair statement,
Yes.
Joe?
Really it is.
They're already asking for bills.
Yeah.
So we're-
I know, we don't even have any.
Wow. But check again,
But
right?
it's an easy decision for me, so.
Yeah, that's an easy,
Yeah,
that you don't have to pause.
okay,
Here we are in Hartford at the White River Junction courthouse renovation, as I said earlier with the Brattleboro. Very similar. However, what we have at this facility also is roughly the 5 to 8 year mark. We ended up having water intrusion coming in through the walls. During 15 years ago or so, they'd gone through and had found out that the flashing that is above the windows had failed. It wasn't a rigid flashing, it was a soft asphaltic flashing. And somehow it no longer stuck to the substrate behind it, and it slipped and water's getting in. I was just down there Friday because taking off all the brick and the concrete, the precast concrete around it, that's what we're looking at doing, insulating the outer walls to comply with energy code, would require additional structural framing. So it's like, okay, let's get it done. How can we, you know, not do that because of the added cost of the project? This is construction manager, as I mentioned, DEW, and so we're working together to develop a way on how to do this. Is putting using right to tear off all the brick and put it all back. So we're now going to, we've devised a way we believe to take off and attack it from the inside. So all the sheetrock and the exterior walls are going to come off, remove the insulation, and then from the inside, inserting rigid flashing above those windows. The windows are being replaced, so the opening will be there, but you have to get it in between the exterior sheeting and out through your brick. We're going to give it a try and see if that works. And we're hoping it does. And then so the inside, fill in the void with insulation, rigid insulation, sheetrock, and put it all back together. But in there, they're also doing judiciary over the times have changed. They have like the family courts and big courtroom anymore, it's smaller rooms. So they're realigning things. Plus an additional front, and that's for processing visitors as you're coming through, because of the magnetometer and also bag checks that are being done. So we'll put a light addition on the front and one on the side also.
So I think this is really, I just want to make this connection too, because Joe had just gone through the different types of phases, but he's also talked about different types of construction methods that we use. So this is a guaranteed maximum price. This is due construction. And so what that means doesn't mean the cost isn't going to change. But Joe, without me totally messing it up, with this guaranteed maximum price, this new finding, that, you know, bigger than what we anticipated to Senator Ingles' comments earlier. How does that work in this method? Because we're gonna try to stay to the GMP, but it gives you the flexibility to move stuff around. Is that,
Yes. So
which I think is important. So he's telling you this is happening, doesn't mean, it still means we might have to come back and ask for more money. I'm not saying we will or we won't, but with this method, Joe has some flexibility. And I think you should highlight that.
okay, so when you do a regular general contractor lump sum bid, you have your plans and specs, and that's what they give you a price on. Sometimes it's easier because that's what you get to argue over. It says this type of wall sheeting is supposed to be 5/8, not 1/2 inch. Doesn't matter that code says it can be a 1/2 inch. That's what we bought and that's what you bid on. That's what we want. And so that's what you argue over. There's always change orders, you know, again, if you open up the wall and you find out, don't expect that. With a construction manager, they're acting on our behalf. So what they're doing is we go through a selection process that they provide proposals that we go through, we look at their pricing, their overhead, and everything else, what they're proposing to us. And then we select the best contractor. Construction manager. Now they turn around, once the plans are complete, then we hire them at the schematic phase, because they also help us during that design and saying, what you're designing there is gonna cost you more money. If you did this instead, this type of unit, you could actually save money, you can get it faster. Switch gear Amberlin units, you know, about 2 years out. Here's one though that they meant that you could get, if our engineer agrees, that's great. Once it's all bid out, you get your guaranteed maximum price. It works almost like a lump sum. However, any money left over, because it's an open book, returns to the state. So there are allowances. So we go out to bid with things that we're not 100% sure on and go flooring. We want some type of flooring, we can carry an allowance for that. We actually pick the flooring. So sometimes you get out to bid faster because you want to start digging in the springtime. But if you don't have your complete drawings together, what do? You can do that. You put an allowance together.
Right.
In a situation like this that we have down at Hartford, it's $1.5 million in demolition of the brick and the precast alone. So that's where we'll be working with our construction manager going, all right, there's that bucket of money that's already laid out on that's the proposal that we have, that dollar amount. What's it going to take now to do this other method of taking off the sheetrock, trying to figure out how we can get that flashing on the inside? If it's more money, okay, that's something that we have to evaluate. Is it worth it? If it's less money and it's still the right way to go, it works, then that money returns to us. So that's where sometimes working with a construction manager is better. It takes more involvement from the project manager to be working as a team with a construction manager than just the architect and the project manager going, this is what I own. You owe me this. Now it's a team approach going, but what if we do this? It could save time and money. Is that worth it? Sometimes the answer is no. This is what we want. And they're okay, fine. But you have that ability. So there are some jobs that are worth doing it, having a construction manager, and some jobs straight out lump sum.
Yeah. And I think with the findings that Joe just learned about literally last week, you know, we're in a better position. Doesn't mean that it's all going to fit in here because it's a court building, but he has some ability to manage and move. If this particular job had been a general bid, we'd be back probably with a significant possible, you know, change order and request. So it's just nice. Thank you for giving our team the tools to be able to do different bidding methods based on what they know about those buildings, because it does make a difference.
Sure.
And this is a great example.
Great, thank you. Any questions on that or comments? Okay.
So that's the fun part right now. Almost all the demolition is complete down at Hartford, and they're going to start now.
So it doesn't look like that right now.
The outside, yes, if you
It
went
does?
down there right now,
Okay.
it still looks like that. There's a
Okay.
fence around it. Inside, a lot of sheetrock's missing for the walls. They're gonna be moving on the inside. The slab, because some of the restrooms have been relocated to make room for others, office space and the likes of that, or better coordination and flow inside of the courthouse.
Right.
You know, dirt is what you're looking at.
Okay.
And this is just also a great example of the connection, because we want to keep this project on time as opposed to budget.
Right.
Because we've actually had to lease space and move the courts out. So that goes back to Eric Pembroke, right? So
Right.
that's that whole connection, because they're in a temporary place, and our goal is to get them back in to their
Sure.
revised place.
So the estimated fall 2025 is still on.
Unless yeah, we are, I
That's a
mean,
typo, should be 26.
I was about to say.
Sorry.
oh,
Wow.
where's it?
Did you- did you-
This fall.
Did you move that up?
No, the
Yeah, we just
schedule,
changed it,
the
no.
schedule has advanced by 6 weeks. So actually we're ahead.
Oh,
However, because of this new finding.
We're back on schedule.
Exactly.
So thank you for picking that up. We do have a typo there.
You still have to change the name. Still says district court.
Yes. But that was last plan. I don't know what it's going to say.
I remember it being
Well, there
district
are-
court rather than the superior court, it's something division.
Yes, yes, the courts have changed on how they function now, because
It's actually been a while.
it has. And I don't think it might just be Hartford. On the stormwater, compliments of the Vermont Clean Water Act. We are to look at any of our sites that have more than 3 acres of impervious surface inside of the Lake Champlain and the Memphremagog watershed. So there's 8 sites that are impacted. Some of these are a little bit simpler than others, like start at the bottom of this Waterbury State Office Complex. Even though that was reconstructed in Irene, it did meet these standards. Some of its paperwork, hopefully nothing more than that to bring it into compliance. If it is, it'd be minimal work we have to do. Next up is the Virgins, Northern Job Corp site that is down there. That one could be out to bid next month. And the other ones are coming together. Uniqueness is Northern State and Northwest State Correctional Facility. They have a perimeter road that's well over a mile long at both sites. Because over time, they've been a gravel road, and over time, they regrade the road. The road here, constantly gets wider and wider and wider. What we're going to do is we're actually going to end up regrading the road, paving the road, and reducing it to a 12-foot. Only one vehicle that doesn't loop around the facility. They don't need a 20-foot wide. That'll save us substantially in the amount of stormwater collection that we have to do. So it seems odd that we go to pave it, but that in the long run is going to save us. And at the Central Services in Middlesex, where you saw that site plan before, as laid out right now, we are only 1/10 of an acre over. So what we're evaluating is what can we do? Can we shave 1/10 of an acre as opposed to having to comply with this? Last I knew, we could not. It was close, but not enough. Capital complex is by far the
Yeah,
worst.
just
Sorry.
the threshold may reduce in the future too, so.
Naturally. And the capital complex, if you're overlooking the complex, we're buildings and parking lots. There's not a grass field out there to do a lot of stormwater retention ponds and the likes of that. So there's subsurface stuff. Then the Department of Labor. Depends on how long you've been around in Montpelier area. There was the parking lot against the river and in the building. And over the years, we've infilled between that. That infill, which is, I think, 2 parking rows and a drive, has subsurface stormwater underneath it. That's what we're sort of looking at in Montpelier. At the time we were starting this investigation, and then we have flood. But what's that going to do if we put it across the street? Getting across the street is another issue. The amount of utilities that are in the road, stormwater capture across the street with some of the larger parking lots is going to be difficult because we probably can't get a line over there. So they're struggling with what we're going to do inside of the capital complex. So we're still working on that. We did have $600,000 in ARPA funding. Almost, 400,000 of that has been encumbered and expended, going to the designers.
Okay, so this is,
Oops.
yeah, this might be a good place to stop too, because I wanna stop in 5 minutes just to give the committee a break before David Sheets comes in. What's the time frame for this?
We're hoping to have Virgins and possibly Waterbury out on the street next month or two.
And then for
Virgins.
the,
And the rest, could be midsummer. It's not the best time to be going out to bid for site work. But that's when it would be, and maybe with a potential start next spring. We have 5 years, I think, from the time.
that was my question. Okay,
So
so
it's
the
not.
capital complex will
rush.
probably
Yes,
be your last one.
yes, because there also may be some, depends on what we do for mitigation because of the flood. If any, that could come into play also. So it's sort of, scanning type thing.
Right.
If we do this, knock down a few buildings or whatever becomes green space, well, then that becomes stormwater space also.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Chairman.
You already stopped. Never mind.
I go back.
I just wanted to see, the capital project on 25 that you mentioned earlier. Because we don't, on the website, I think it pulls up Vermont dairy producers on here. The documents, the slide. I'll show you.
Oh, so the next one or
No,
what do you think?
I'll show you
It
that.
was slide 25, is that was?
Yes.
Slide 25. Just the screenshot.
So in our documents, this is what he's not.
Okay.
It pulls up from.
Oh, so the,
Yeah,
our link
it's
is
the
not
link is
good.
bad.
Oh darn, okay.
Which was this?
Yeah, the state house expansion. I was just curious about that. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple minutes.
Good. So this, what you see here is all the existing buildings and the ages of their construction. The ellipses that you're looking at, there's the blue and the red, is we're looking at proposed renovations, additions in those locations. So it's really about connecting the sort of the front half of the State House to the back half. Part of that was, when you are walking through the card room, you got the ramp going in, you just have that narrow walkway. It's a tight fit. What can we do there? Also, the way where the stairs are, the elevator, the back corner off of the cafeteria. Potentially add a new stair tower and elevator shaft out there and connecting that and having that rear entrance, which is the public accessible entrance. And the only other one is the one down here in the Lincoln hallway. So having that one as a public entrance and you're potentially screening, originally was done, we were getting some ARPA funds for COVID. And because that was the only accessible public access, was for having that for COVID screening. The funds that came down were for, the next pandemic of COVID, and it's like, well, the next pandemic, de-COVID. But that's what started this thing as to, how do you at least get to that? Whether you use for security or anything else in the future, it's how to manage that and, the amount of stacking of people, like when a bus tour shows up, where those people stand inside, outside, and how do they fit? And then that whole flow. Also, the red ellipse that you see over in the bottom right-hand corner between the Senate and the House is out of the Senate. There is no second means of egress. So that was looking at taking one of the windows and going out through there for a stair tower. The problem with that is next drew over to be blocking the window of the stair tower. So if you envision out this window here, set of stairs, even if you made a glass tower, there's still some blockage of light coming in. Not just, saves the Senate, they're okay with it because you get the second means of egress, not so much for the House. So it's how to make that work, and that's where right now just still. It's not design phase. I'll make that work.
Exactly. Okay.
Snuck another one in.
Yeah, that was good. No,
I was
that's
just
all.
curious, you mentioned earlier, and
Yeah.
you can't hit about things, gotta.
Well, slide 25. That's slide 25. There was I set this up for if you're, the House follows along right off the spreadsheet. And that's how,
Oh, that's the
So,
order of
that is
the,
the order, yes.
okay, so then we'll have our spreadsheets next time when we finish this. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's the order that I've done for no particular reason. And
Oh, it makes
have a
sense.
group of-
No, thank you. It's good. And we'll have you back to complete this presentation, but I'm glad we were able to do so much of it today.
You're welcome.
So thank you.
I don't wish we had a classroom in the State House for kids groups or like
Oh,
like a small classroom.
yeah. We do have rooms that, I guess people use as classrooms, but mostly it's the hallways. That's a good thought. Okay, so do we have anything else? I think we should, just take a break now and come back